Welcome to the Newsome MMA podcast, partnered with Heavy Duty Fight Management. I'm your host, as always, Newsome, with your co-host Jon, and tonight we're going to break down UFC on ESPN Plus 7 from St. Petersburg, Russia. Jon, how are you doing tonight, man?
I'm very well, thank you. I'm very well. Just coming down from the highs of UFC 236 last weekend, and then we've got another card in Russia to look forward to this weekend, man. So it's going to be good.
Before we start, I've just got a few things to mention. Those who follow me on Twitter will already know that we now have the podcast on multiple audio platforms with SoundCloud and Spotify, and iTunes will come shortly too. This is huge for the podcast as we can now expand the reach and the people can listen more effectively whilst they're on the move as well. Now, along with this, and again on Twitter, I announced that Jon and I have been working on a new format for the podcast. We used to just go through the fight card from bottom to top and break down every fight, but there are a lot of other shows that do the same thing, and now we've entered other platforms. We've decided that it's time to be a little bit different. There are some fights that require a more in-depth analysis than others, and I also want to include more of a betting perspective in the breakdowns too. So how we're going to do this is by segmenting the podcast into the following sections. First of all, we have the Showtime Fights, where we pick 2 to 3 of the best matched fights and exciting fights on the card and spend more time breaking those fights down. Then we'll move on to the Parlay Piece, where we'll pick 2 fighters who have a very high probability of winning, but their betting lines are too high to play a straight bet on. After the Parlay Piece, we'll then move on to the Dogfight. In this section, we'll talk about one fighter who we believe is the best underdog play on the entire card, as people love to cash those plus money bets. And finally, we'll finish with the quickfire round, where we'll quickly run over the rest of the fights and pick our winners, along with the method of victory as well. And in addition to this, I will also pick 2 to 3 fights from this quickfire round and give a written breakdown with betting advice on these fights and post them on the Newsome MMA website in the brand new MMA betting section. You can go to newsomemma.co.uk/MMA-betting to view this new section. And with all the announcements fired out, we're now going to break down UFC St. Petersburg, and we enter the Showtime Fights. The first Showtime fight tonight is the main event of the night. We've got Aleksei versus Alistair Overeem. Jon, who have you got?
Yeah, I mean, how could we go into the Showtime Fights for the very first time without hitting the main event for St. Petersburg this weekend? And I'm looking forward to this fight, man. Obviously, it was meant to be Alexander Volkov in there against Overeem, which I was really looking forward to. Aleksei Oleinik has jumped in with Volkov pulling out, and it's a really intriguing matchup for me. I've been umming and ahhing over which way that I'm going to go with this fight, because obviously it's, again, we say this so many times, it's striker versus grappler. We know what Oleinik, we know what his strength is, we know what he specialises in, that Ezekiel choke, and he's a dangerous guy, man. If he can get the fight to the ground, he's super dangerous. And we saw against Mark Hunt him take some heavy shots. He was under some adversity, but he ploughed through that, and he managed to get the fight to the mat, and he managed to take the back and get the rear naked choke victory. And we've seen it so many times, him pull out a submission when we don't think it's possible, or him even pulling guard into crazy things like pulling guard into mount and things like that, because he's hit that Ezekiel choke from on the bottom when he's been mounted as well. I think it was Junior Albini as well was the victim in that instance. But Alistair Overeem as well, when you look at him, everyone straight away thinks striker, out and out striker, kickboxer, but he's got a very sneakily underrated ground game. He's got a lot of submission wins on his record. I know that before his last fight with Pavlovich, who's also fighting on his card, before that he was fighting with he's training with Team Elevation in Denver, and I think Curtis Blades was one of his main sparring partners and training partners in there. So I honestly think this personally, I think this is a better matchup for Alistair Overeem than the Volkov fight, because the Volkov fight, I think, would have remained pretty much standing, and I think we all know Overeem's pretty chinny now from his years and years of competing. And I think that Volkov would have exploited that at some point over the 5 rounds, and I think he might have finished Overeem. But I'm actually going with Alistair Overeem to win this fight. Now, Oleinik is tough. He's a tough guy. He can take a beating. We've seen that before. he's like I said, he took some heavy shots from Mark Hunt, but the Reem has got such a diverse range of strikes. I mean, he can kickbox. He's got very good knees and elbows. I mean, that knee that put away Mark Hunt back at UFC 209, man, that was brutal. He's got elbows. He's ground and pound. I mean, if Oleinik does like pull guard or anything like that, Overeem's wise. He's wise to submissions off the bottom. The amount of time he's been around, and then if he does get the opportunity to posture up and land some ground and pound, we saw what he did to Pavlovich. I mean, he only landed 3 or 4 strikes on the ground, and Pavlovich was out cold, man. And I just think this fight suits Overeem. I think he has obviously the much better advantage standing. In his last fight, before his last fight, and in his last fight, he said he was going to start being a bit more aggressive in his striking again, because he tried to play it a bit safe and a bit more cautiously in his fights previous to that, but it didn't really work out for him. I like to say that he tried to go down the Junior Dos Santos route with playing safe behind the jab and avoiding strikes and things like that. But when he came out against Pavlovich and was just throwing hands and doing what Overeem has done for so many years, he looked good, man. He looked sharp in there, and it's the best he's looked for a long time. And yeah, I'm going for Overeem to win this fight, and I wouldn't be surprised if he gets another finish via something in the clinch, via knees similar to Mark Hunt, or via elbows. I think he'll work his way inside. Against Pavlovich, he did a few times. He actually shot for a couple of takedowns against Pavlovich, and if he couldn't pull them off, he was happy to clinch, and he works so well in that clinch. I think he's going to utilise that to good effect, and I think he's going to get a finish. I think it's going to be pretty early as well. I'm going with round 2, and I'm going with Alistair Overeem to win by knockout.
Yeah, I favour Overeem in this fight as well. But listen, I also favoured Mark Hunt in that fight against
Yeah.
Aleksei Oleinik as well. But you cannot ever count out the MMA betting killer Aleksei Oleinik. And for those that don't know what I'm talking about with the MMA betting killer thing, man, I've never seen this. I've been betting for nearly 3 years now, and I've never seen so many other handicappers, so many other bettors on one guy in Mark Hunt and lose the fight convincingly. Everybody was expecting Mark Hunt to go in there, deliver a few low kicks, and then just land one of the Hunt bombs and put Oleinik out. But man, it just did not play out like that at all. There's a few different narratives which I disagree with and stuff like that. Ultimately, I just think Hunt was a little unlucky with how he rolled his ankle in that fight, which ultimately ended up on his back. And I was saying in the podcast before that fight that Hunt doesn't really have a neck to choke out yet. Oleinik found a neck to choke him out. So, you can never write Aleksei Oleinik off, and it's tough to do it again in this spot. Like, I'm very cautious about picking Alistair Overeem. I mean, like I said, the fight favours him. I think that he by far is the better striker. I still think that he's got power. His chin, we have questioned it. Obviously, is declining. Francis Ngannou nearly killed him, and then Blades opened him up like a tin of beans as well. So it's it's a question mark on his chin. But I think if he really had that much of a devastating chin, I think Pavlovich would have found it. I know he finished Pavlovich in round 1, but it was sort of the end of round 1 or towards the end of round 1. So Pavlovich had his moments in that fight to find Overeem's chin, and Pavlovich hits hard as well. So in regards to the chin, I'm not totally convinced just yet. I need to see more of it, but I really don't think that it's gonna play a part in this fight, because although it's heavyweights and every heavyweight hits hard and every heavyweight's human and the chins can only take so much damage, I'd really struggle to see Oleinik knocking Overeem out. I think that would be one of the shocks of the year for sure. Overeem's got to be careful though. Like you were talking, John, about him having potential success in the clinch, but that's what Oleinik's going to want. Oleinik's going to want Overeem to close the distance for him, and in my opinion, I really don't think Overeem should do that. I think Overeem should use his movement, use his distance management, come in and out of range quickly and effectively, and not spend too much time anywhere close to Oleinik, because he's got a variety of ways to get the fight to the mat, whether it be a single leg or a double leg or just grabbing a body lock. And he's strong. Like he's very deceivingly strong. Once he gets his arms around your body, once he locks the hands around the body, he's very difficult to shake off. And a lot of the time, the fights end up on the mat. And if Overeem goes to the mat with Oleinik, I don't care whether it's Overeem on top, whether if Oleinik pulls guard, I don't care whether it's Overeem on bottom or it's a scramble. He's got to be careful in every position. I mean, just to touch upon how decorated Aleksei Oleinik is on the mat, and we can talk about his credentials in jiu-jitsu, but let's just talk about his MMA credentials. The guy's had 69 fights. He's won 57 of those 69 fights, which is impressive alone. Out of those 57 wins, he's got 45 submissions, which is just unbelievable, unheard of. And even when we go into a little bit more depth in that, out of the 45 submissions, 11 have been Ezekiel chokes, which is crazy. But he's also got some other crazy submissions on there as well, such as like scarf hold headlocks and things like that. So the dude is not to be messed with on the mat at all. I really think that that Overeem could put himself in trouble in this fight with exactly what you said, John. I've already touched upon it as well in regards to Overeem being good in the clinch and him having elbows and knees and being able to control his opponent. But if he makes one mistake in that clinch, then the fight could end up on the mat, and then instantly, I know Overeem is a little underrated on the mat. I know he has submissions. I know he's been in the sport of MMA for a long time, and he's got a ground game. Of course, he's got a ground game both offensively and defensively. But if he makes one mistake and goes to the mat here, instantly the tide turns, the fight turns, and suddenly all eyes will be on Aleksei Oleinik and waiting to see what he can do. If Overeem does get taken down, or if the fight does end up on the mat, he's got to scoot out. He's got to try and stand up at any cost. He can't afford to play around on the mat against Oleinik. Ultimately, again, similar to what I said with the Mark Hunt breakdown when we did that podcast, I just feel that Oleinik is very deficient on the feet. That's where Overeem really thrives. He's a decorated striker. He has been all his career. He's got, like we've already mentioned, knees. He's got elbows. He's got kicks up and down the body. His combinations are there. His punches are accurate. They're also hard. And I just feel that with every fight starts standing, and if Overeem's smart in this fight, if he's very smart, he should get the win relatively easily. But like I say, I've got slight concerns of him getting too close to Oleinik, and Oleinik just repeating what he did against Mark Hunt, So it's a tough fight to call for me because of the huge path to victory of Oleinik. But I am siding with Alistair Overeem. I think that he can play smart. I think he can move in and out of range, especially early on. And I think with combinations, he can keep Oleinik away from him as well. So if Oleinik starts to get a little bit hungry as Overeem is coming in and out with shots, and he is wanting to close that distance, I think the combinations and the power of Overeem can just make Oleinik just take one or two steps backwards, like I say, when he's getting hungry, and that'll ultimately make it a little bit harder for Oleinik to close the distance and get in on Overeem. I think the fight ends even earlier than you, John. I've got Overeem to win. I think he's going to find a knockout punch within that first round, and I think he's going to upset the home crowd. I've got Alistair Overeem to win via knockout. Now, in the next Showtime fight, we've got Sergei Pavlovich, who we've just already mentioned, coming back after his knockout loss against Alistair Overeem on his UFC debut, and he's fighting Marcelo Golm. John, who have you got?
Yeah, I'm really excited to see what Sergei Pavlovich can do in this fight, and to kind of get more of a read as to where he sits in that UFC heavyweight picture, because obviously he came into the Overeem fight undefeated at 12-0. He was previously fighting Fight Nights Global. He's got a lot of his finishes. I think 9 out of his 12 finishes have come via knockout or TKO. A lot of those are early in the first round as well, and we did see him catch Overeem with a couple of nice overhands early on as well, which Overeem did eat pretty well. It didn't seem to affect him too much, but Pavlovich did look like he had good striking, and you can see why he's got so many knockout wins on his record now. Going up against Golm, personally, I don't massively rate Golm from what I've seen so far. Obviously, he came in, another guy who came into the UFC undefeated. He was only 4-0 when he came into the UFC. He fought back at against Christian Colombo back in 2017. But when you look at his record, the 4-0, the 4 fights that he fought, that he won, the guys were 0-0, 0-0, 0-0, and 0-2, I believe. And sorry, he's 5-0. Sorry, when he came in against Colombo, and 1-2, the other guy was. So no one had a winning record. No one had more than 3 fights on their in their professional career when they fought him. So, and the guys who's fighting wasn't really fighting on the obviously we know the good feeder cards that we see so often nowadays. He wasn't really fighting on anything that that you'd particularly say that they're known for having good competition. I mean, the fight prior to his last fight coming into the UFC was at an event called Mr. Cage, which I don't know if anyone listening has ever heard of Mr. Cage and
Mr.
what that's
Cage
about.
Is a great promotion, man.
But yeah, fighting against a guy who was 0-2 on Mr. Cage, man, and I think obviously he looked good in his UFC debut. He defeated Colombo by a rear naked choke in the first round, looked decent, but then came up against Tim Johnson and most recently Arjun Buehler, and he lost both those fights via unanimous decision. I mean, the Buehler fight, I was watching that back this afternoon actually, and just one thing that I noticed was his real lack of head movement. I mean, Buehler was hitting him time and time again with the jab, and I'd say striking isn't Buehler's main strength, and yeah, he was lighting up Golm. He was hitting him with the jab, he was hitting him with the 1-2, he's hitting him with uppercuts, and Golm, as resilient and tough he is, I mean, he was trying to walk through them as often as he could, but if there's only so long that you can go on doing that. Now, the one thing that Golm did impress me with against Buehler was those low leg kicks. I mean, he was chopping Buehler from the very start. I mean, he does have quite a nice jab himself as well. He was using that jab, and that was setting up the low calf kick, and that can cause trouble. I mean, if he can get firing that jab and that low kick off early on against Pavlovich, he can cause some real trouble, because no matter how good of a striker you are, no matter how good of a wrestler you are, if you can't put weight on that leg, then you're going to be struggling to do anything in a fight. But ultimately, I think we're going to see Pavlovich's first win in the UFC here, and I think he's going to inflict a bit of a beating on Golm, because, like I mentioned, Golm hasn't looked particularly good with his striking defense. He just kind of takes a shot to land a shot, takes 2 or 3 shots sometimes to land a shot, and he just tries to kind of, without being disrespectful, saying block punches with his face. That's kind of what he has been doing, and yeah, I don't think he's going to be able to do that against Pavlovich, and I don't think he's been able to do it for very long. So yeah, for that reason, I'm going with Sergei Pavlovich to win this fight, and again, I think he's going to get a finish. I think it's going to be in the second round, so I'm going with Pavlovich to win via knockout in round 2.
Yeah, for me, I've got quite a few opinions on this fight. I think it's a really intriguing fight, first and foremost, but the first thing that interests me is the betting line. So we've got Sergei Pavlovich at -270 and Marcelo Golm at +230. Now, when I first saw the lines released, I instantly dug into tape, because I thought that Golm was being massively disrespected in this fight. Now, I'm not right now, as we sit here breaking this podcast down, I'm not right now massively high on either guy. Like, I want to see more from them both, but I do believe we can. I do believe they've both got potential to grab numerous wins in the UFC. With those numerous wins comes improvement, especially from Golm's point of view, with him being at ATT and with him also being a young fighter as well. There's definitely that room for improvement. But for me, the reason why I'm not massively high on either of them right now is because I find that they're both quite low volume. I wouldn't have said that about Golm before the Buehler fight, but it does seem to me that Golm does try and just wait to pick his shots to be more accurate, opposed to just throwing volume out there, which is not always necessarily a bad thing, because you're not wasting strikes, and everything that you're throwing is landing, and again you're conserving energy. But I just feel against a fighter that is going to put pressure on you, that is going to throw volume, that he's going to come unstuck a little bit. And you could say that Arjun Bula did that against him, pushing forward, throwing the bombs, throwing volume at him, and ultimately that's how he ended up losing that fight. But I think in this fight with Pavlovich, it's not massively, the stylistic matchup isn't totally against Golm, is what I'm trying to say. I think that Pavlovich is a similar sort of striker, tries to pick his shots, again conserves energy, doesn't like to waste strikes, and stylistically I think it's going to favour both guys. I think it's going to be a technical fight, a chess match at times, a bit uneventful at times as well. But I do feel that Golm is going to have a little bit more freedom in this fight than he's had in his previous two fights, because as you've mentioned, John, he's coming off two losses back to back against Tim Big Dick Johnson and Arjun Bula, and the common style between those two losses is they're both really clinch heavy opponents and wrestlers as well, that like to get the fight to the mat, that like to bully their opponents. And as I've said time and time again on these podcasts, the one thing that can halt a striker, such as Golm, the one thing that can really halt a striker is having that wrestling or that clinch threat, because that stops the striker from overcommitting on strikes. It stops the striker from being reckless and taking chances, because ultimately it could end up with that striker being on the back, which is absolutely where they don't need to be. Whereas with Pavlovich, he does have takedowns. We've seen that in previous fights, but predominantly he is a striker. And unless Pavlovich is put in any serious trouble on the feet, where he is getting hit a little bit too much, or he is getting rocked, I don't see him resorting to wrestling. I see him just resorting to his technical striking. Now, Golm in his last fight, I think one of the reasons why he struggled towards the end of the fight is because he was kicking Bula with those low calf kicks, which is what you've already mentioned, but he was kicking sometimes with the foot opposed to the shin, and we saw Bula check one of the kicks, and unfortunately for Golm, that was one of the kicks that came in with the foot. It put a massive lump on Golm's foot, and from there you can only imagine maybe not the pain he was in because of the adrenaline. It tends to be something that you feel afterwards, but the movement, it would have halted of Golm. He wouldn't have been as fresh on his feet, and like I say, his movement would have just been affected from that kick. Now, I do like the fact that he's using the low calf kicks, and I say it time and time again, it's part of what American Top Team are doing right now, it seems.
Yeah.
Putting these low calf kicks into every single one of the fighters, and it's working. I think in this fight, as long as he can just keep on hitting Pavlovich's calf with his shin opposed to his foot, that'll prevent, any sort of unnecessary and unfortunate swelling or injuries to his foot, and he can have success. But ultimately, I just think the fight is going to be, like I say, it's going to be a technical fight. I don't think we're going to see too many wild shots. I think as I've already mentioned, it's going to be a little bit of a chess fight, and I think it's going to go to a decision, which is where I see the issue for Golm winning this fight, because let's not pretend that we all didn't watch UFC Moscow and see pretty much every Russian win decisions on the scorecards. And listen, most of them deserve the wins on the scorecards, but there was one or two fights that we were very skeptical of, for sure, of how the Russian fighter won in the huge way that the scorecard suggested. Now, I almost think that bleeds into this fight again and into this event, because we're in Russia, and I feel that any fights that go to the scorecards and are relatively close, I can just honestly see the Russians getting the nod. I just feel that if this is a close fight, which I think it's going to be, I think Pavlovich is going to win. I think he's going to get the nod on the judges' scorecards. So for that reason, I'm taking Sergei Pavlovich to win, and I'm going to take him to win via decision. Now, in the next Showtime fight, the final Showtime fight of this podcast, we've got Gadzhimurad Antigulov versus Michał Oleksiejczuk. John, who have you got?
Yeah, this is going to be a really fun fight. I mean, these guys are two entertaining, exciting guys in the light heavyweight division. Obviously, Antigulov is coming into the fight off the loss against Kutalaba back in July of 2018. Man, I mean, that's gone so quickly. That tells you how time flies. But I couldn't believe it when I saw that. But yeah, that was a really interesting fight for me. And it was action packed. I mean, it finished late on in the first round, but what really worried me in that fight was how gassed Antigulov was. I mean, he was obviously he's got that heavy wrestling style. He took Kutalaba down a couple of times and did some damage and was winning the round. But then he looked like he was starting to gas, and Kutalaba came back into it, and then he tied him up against the cage and started hitting him with some brutal elbows and ripping him to the body, and that was all she wrote. And yeah, seeing that fight does worry me. I mean, I know that that Antigulov can get fights finished early. I mean, when you look through his record, he tends to get fights to the mat and choke you out in the first round, or if he doesn't do that, he can finish you with strikes. I mean, a couple of times fighting for ACB, I mean, he's won via strikes in 12 seconds into round one, 2 minutes 15 seconds into round one. So 3 minutes 53 seconds into round one. He can finish fights on the mat as well as standing, but the fact that he was so gassed and that late in the first round really worries me going into this fight against Oleksiejczuk. I mean, Oleksiejczuk, we first saw him against Khalil Roundtree back at UFC 219. Obviously, he got the win, but he was overturned to a no contest. And then we're all interested to see how, after his absence, his suspension, how he'd fare against Jean Valente. And man, Valente's a tough guy. We know he's notoriously tough to put away, and Oleksiejczuk just ripped him to the body early in round one, and that's all she wrote. And I like Oleksiejczuk for a guy who's 24 years old, light heavyweight division. I know people have been saying for years that it's time for some like fresh blood and some new young prospects coming up in the division. And I think we're starting to see that now. And I think Oleksiejczuk is he's going to be one of those guys. I mean, we've got guys like Rakic that we talk about, but I think Oleksiejczuk could be potentially one of these guys as well that breaks into the top five. And like I say, he's only 24 years old. And what I do like about him is that he comes in to the fights. He seems to come in. I don't think he cuts much weight at all, and he's not the biggest light heavyweight at all. I mean, he's only about 6 foot, and like I say, he doesn't look like he cuts a great deal of weight, but he comes in and he's quick and he's got energy and he can go the distance. I mean, he's gone to decisions before in his career, as well as getting stoppage wins. I mean, his main threat is on the feet. I mean, he's better on the feet than he's on the mat. It'll be interesting to see how much of a get-up game from bottom he's got, because I am certain that at some point Antigulov will take him down and be able to spend some time on top. Be interesting to see what his ground game's like, if he can stave off the submission attempts, because that's what Antigulov is going to predominantly go for, I think. And I wouldn't be surprised if Antigulov shoots in straight away from that first bell. But like I said at the very start of this breakdown, Antigulov gassed in that late in that first round of his previous fight, even though he spent a lot of time on top doing damage. And if Oleksiejczuk can scramble, and if he can keep forcing Antigulov to stand back up and force the takedown again, and then every fight starts standing, as we know. And I think Oleksiejczuk, if he rips the body of Antigulov and goes for them heavy kicks, them heavy punches like he did against Valente, I think that's going to take the gas out of Antigulov even more, and that's where I think Oleksiejczuk's openings will come in. So for me, I think Oleksiejczuk's going to win this fight, and I think we're going to see him get another stoppage win. I'm going with Oleksiejczuk to win this fight, and I think he's going to win it in round 3 via stoppage.
Okay, so for me, I'm gonna start with the betting line, because I think this betting line is very, very off. So we've got Michał Oleksiejczuk at -210, and we've got Antigulov at +175. Now, for me, that line is just so wide because I genuinely think this fight is a pick'em. For the very simple reason is I feel if the fight goes to the mat and, you know, Antigulov's got a few minutes to work at least, I think Antigulov's going to get him out of there on the mat. But on the flip side, I think that if Antigulov can't get him to the mat, or if he does and Oleksiejczuk stands straight back up similar to what Ion Cutelaba did, and then keeps the fight standing, then I don't really see much of a path to victory on the feet for Antigulov. So I ultimately feel that this fight totally depends whether it's standing or on the mat. Now, for me, I like Oleksiejczuk as a fighter as well. I also like him as a prospect. The dude's fun. He looks like he's got power. He's aggressive. You know, he's got that Polish blood, and you know, we all know that Polish fighters are a fighting nation. And the problem I'm having with Oleksiejczuk is his level of competition so far. So we've seen him twice in the UFC. Once on his debut against Khalil Roundtree. It was overturned with a no contest by the NSAC due to a USADA violation, I believe. So taking that USADA violation out of that, he did look good against Khalil Roundtree. He took a lot of damage early on. He was able to weather a storm and then came back over the next couple of rounds and really put it on Roundtree to win a decision. And then he's come back after that fight and he's fought 1 minute 34 seconds against Jean Vellante, a fighter that I believe is massively on the decline, a fighter that I believe is slowing down, a fighter that I believe his durability is taking a hit each time he steps into the cage. So I cannot put too much stock into that win over Jean Vellante. Now, I'm not discrediting the win. I'm not taking that away from him. You know, he landed a beautiful liver shot that absolutely put Jean Vellante down. But I'm just finding it hard right now as we speak to judge exactly how good he is. And I think a lot is going to be told in this fight with Antigulov, because Antigulov is a 25-fight veteran. He's fought some big names. He's fought in some big promotions. He's got a lot of finishes. You know, he's got 4 by knockout. He's got 15 submissions on his record. You know, that's 19 finishes out of his 20 wins. The dude is a phenomenal finisher. He's training at American Top Team. He's that Dagestani-born Russian. He'll look for the takedowns. His grappling's good. His submission game is also very good as well. We've seen Michał taken down on the regional scene before. He has been able to pop back up. But again, I think the pressure that Antigulov has on top, I think the grappling abilities that Antigulov has is going to cause Michał problems on bottom that he's not seen before in his career. And for me, that's a massive worry for him, because if Antigulov does come out the gates and try and take him down just like he did against Ion Cutelaba and Michał can't get up, then man, I don't, again, like I said with Antigulov striking, with Michał on his back, I don't really see how he's going to progress in the fight and how he's going to be able to stop Antigulov submitting him, because I just think Antigulov is that good on the feet, that good on the mat. Now, the thing is with the Ion Cutelaba fight, so Antigulov comes out, he takes Ion Cutelaba down. Cutelaba doesn't panic, he doesn't try and, you know, defensively grapple. He just quickly gets himself to the side of the cage, so his back's against the cage as quickly as he possibly can, so he can use that to wall walk and get back up to his feet, which he did. You know, he was successful doing that. Now, with Antigulov, he's one of those types of wrestlers that once he's got his hands locked, and his grip's really good and he's really hard to shake off you. But what the tools that Ion Cutelaba adopted against Antigulov was when Antigulov kept that grip and kept on trying to grind and work for that takedown, waiting for the right times to chain from the waist to a single or a double, Cutelaba was delivering devastating knees to his body, to the midriff of Antigulov, and Antigulov took about 3 or 4 of these brutal knees clean whilst he was attempting the takedowns and the chain wrestling. He released the grip, he stood back up. He went for an upper body and an upper body grip to see if he can work again his takedowns and try and get the fight to the mat. But then Kutalaba was finding these tiny pockets of space where again he was delivering devastating knees to the stomach of Antigulov. And by the time all this happened, Antigulov had taken like 6, 7, 8 knees clean to the midriff, which ultimately gassed him out. And then obviously Kutalaba found the finish. Now Antigulov didn't quit either. He was getting hit with some bombs, but he was on the feet. He was trying to stay in the fight. So that was a good showing from him. The fact that he has got heart and he's not very easy to put away. But I do think that Antigulov has a cardio issue in regards to his striking. So on the mat, he's the type of wrestler and the type of grappler that will go all day long, and you'll very rarely see him tired out whilst he's on the mat, again defensively or offensively, because that's his world. That's where he works best. Whereas on the feet, I think he has got a very limited gas tank, and this is again, I'm mentioning points from both sides here where, for me, I cannot see why this fight isn't a pick'em. Yes, you've got Michał. I think the line is definitely reflecting some recency bias, which is a huge thing in MMA, and it is something as a handicapper as well that you can capitalize on at times when you're noticing a fighter and who's got recency bias in the betting line. And I do believe that's the case for Michał, because he's beaten Roundtree and Jean Vellante, and 2-0 in the UFC. We know he's 2-0 in the UFC. So there's definitely recency bias in that line because of that. Whereas Antigulov, on the opposite side of the coin, he's just come from a quite a bad fight against Dejan Kutalaba, where he gassed out very quickly. He wasn't able to achieve what he wanted to achieve on the mat and ended up getting finished. So again, there's recency bias in that line. It's a crazy one for me. I think it should be a pick'em. I think the path to victory for both guys is very obvious and very clean. But for me, I'm going to favour the veteran. I'm going to favour the fighter that's been against the slightly stronger opposition and competition over his years. And I think Antigulov's going to get Michał Oleksiejczuk out of there. I think he's going to take him down early. We might not see it as early as the Kutalaba fight. We might just see Antigulov be a little bit more reserved at the start of the fight, use his strikes, get his timing, see what Oleksiejczuk's doing in regards to his striking, and then just time the entry right, make sure he can get Oleksiejczuk on his back and get him settled on his back, get in a good position, and then he can start working his grappling and start to look for submissions. I think that would be a very smart approach from Antigulov. I do think he makes those adjustments in this fight, and for that reason, I'm going to take Gadzhimurad Antigulov to win. I'm going to take him to win via submission. And now we move on to the parlay piece. So the first parlay piece of this card is Islam Makhachev versus Arman Tsarukyan. Now, I've seen a lot of love for Tsarukyan in the MMA betting world, man, and I don't necessarily disagree with it, because he's a plus 350 to plus 400 underdog depending on where you're looking. So he's a huge underdog, and actually when I was watching tape on him, I was really interested before I went into the tape study, because this is a guy on his UFC debut taking a fight with Islam Makhachev in Russia, and I thought, man, like, what a way to come into your UFC debut, to fight one of the biggest prospects in the lightweight division in his home country. Like I said, on your UFC debut, he's a Dagestani-born Russian. Islam Makhachev is. He's got decent striking. He's grappling. I think for me, when I'm analysing grapplers, he's the closest grappler, in my opinion, to Khabib Nurmagomedov in the UFC.
Yeah.
I'm not saying he's as good as Khabib. I'm not saying he's as crafty as Khabib on the mat, but I just think he's the closest we've got to Khabib. And this is a stern test for Tsarukyan, but Tsarukyan has got decent striking. He's been the distance before. His cardio looks good. He's got good takedowns. The problem is, though, it's not that I don't think. I know for a fact he's never fought anybody of the caliber of Islam Makhachev, and that's why I'm leaning with Islam Makhachev in this fight. Now, for me, the line is a little high. Islam's sort of like minus 450, minus 425, again, depending on where you're looking for the betting line. I do think the line keeps on coming down. Like I said, we're seeing love from the cappers on Tsarukyan, so that's going to bring the line slightly down. I also generally think the line is slightly off anyway, so again, I just think as fight week goes on, I do think we see a lower line coming for Islam Makhachev, but I think he's a good parlay piece because there's a few things that I've noticed defensively from Tsarukyan. He can be hit. The distance can be closed with him. He can back up to the cage at times, and again, just those three things that I've mentioned is exactly what a fighter like Islam Makhachev needs in order to get the fight where he's most comfortable, which is obviously on the mat, as we've already mentioned. And he can. We've not seen Tsarukyan be taken down, so this is a little bit of a question mark for me. But we have seen him on his back. I think in one of his fights he was dropped, and the fighter jumped on top of him. And he had the fighter that Tsarukyan was fighting did have a little bit of success on top. He was able to transition. He was able to keep him down for a little bit, but ultimately made a mistake on the mat. Tsarukyan stood back up. I don't think we see many mistakes from fighters such as Islam Makhachev on the mat. I think that his control, like I say, he's got some crafty things like Khabib, like pulling away at the wrists and tying up the legs whilst he's transitioning from position to position on the mat. We see all those crafty little tools that Islam's got, and obviously like we see from Khabib as well. And I just don't think that Islam Makhachev's going to give Tsarukyan the opportunity to get back up to his feet via a mistake. Tsarukyan would really, really have to work to get back up to his feet, which is much easier said than done when you're looking at Islam Makhachev. I do think that Tsarukyan puts up a decent fight against Makhachev. I don't think it'll be a total whitewash, but ultimately I just cannot see Tsarukyan getting his hand raised at the end of the night. I might be wrong. This is mixed martial arts at the end of the day, but Islam Makhachev is legit. He's only getting better as well. He's 27, so he's not entering his peak yet either. His improvements are going to be massive. He's going to be fighting at home. He's the one that's got the biggest path to victory in this fight via top control and grappling. So I think Islam Makhachev's going to win this fight. I think he's going to submit Tsarukyan at some point. I think he's just going to be grinding on him. The ground and pound will be there, and ultimately I just think he'll find an arm or he'll find a neck. And he's a veteran already now, Makhachev. He'll take that, and I think he will tap Tsarukyan out. Now, obviously, this is the parlay piece of the podcast, so if you are wanting to parlay Makhachev, I would recommend just to wait a little bit because, like I say, I do think the line's going to come down relatively significantly as well. But like I say, I really don't see Makhachev losing this fight. I think the probability of him winning is extremely high. I don't blame people from taking a dog shot in this fight either. But like I say, at the end of the fight, one fighter's got to get his hand raised. I think that's Islam Makhachev. John, what about you?
Yeah, I'm following in your footsteps with this one, and I think you've covered it off pretty much perfectly. But I'll just echo a few statements that you've made. I mean, Makhachev, when you look at his fighting style, like you said, he probably is the closest guy with his grappling to Khabib that I can think in the UFC. I mean, we saw that in his last fight against Kajan Johnson. He did exactly what you said, which is trademark of Khabib in tying those legs up as he scoots up into mount, and that eventually led to Johnson leaving an arm out that he wrapped up and got that arm bar. And yeah, he ties up the wrist as well, ties the wrist up behind your own back as well, so you can't get any defense in there either against the ground and pound. And yeah, he's a dangerous guy, and he's getting more dangerous on the feet as well. I mean, we saw that against Gleison Tebow back at UFC 220. I mean, this is not a prime Tebow by any stretch of the imagination, but he showed that he has power in his hands. I mean, that big straight knocked him down and pretty much knocked him out as well. He was done from the one shot. So he is getting more and more well-rounded. He throws a lot of kicks as well. He mixes up the body kick and the head kick, and I think he's working on that striking. And like you say, at his age as well, 27, he's got plenty of time to improve. And I think this guy is going to be he's going to be a top 5 low, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if we saw him fight for the title at some point in the future, because I think his ceiling is that high. And like you say, if he's basing his grappling, and if his grappling's anywhere near half as good as Khabib's, I mean, that stands you in good stead pretty much straight away. Saying that, I hadn't seen a great deal of Tsarukyan before this fight was announced, and before I was looking at the tape going into this fight. And one thing I do like about him, which I think can be dangerous, he's got a very fast switch head kick. And obviously, if he can time that nicely against Makhachev, maybe darting forward for that takedown, then he can cause some danger. I mean, we saw, for example, in the Aljamain Sterling against Marlon Moraes fight. I mean, Moraes went for that head kick, but as Sterling was shooting in, he eventually hit him with a knee, which put him out. But I mean, if he can throw that switch head kick, like I say, quickly, and he can throw it in. He doesn't need a great amount of space to throw it as well. I mean, if anyone's seen his last fight against Felipe Oliveri, he threw that head kick to win it. I mean, he threw it in round 3 as well. So he has got durability, and he's got endurance. He's got stamina. He's a couple of fights before that as well. He finished in round 3, but yeah, that last fight against Oliveri with the head kick, I mean, he threw a really quick combination with the hands, and then threw in that switch high kick and put Oliveri away, and he was so quick and crisp and clean. And in round 3 as well of a fight, I mean, that's some good going, and it just shows that he can be dangerous throughout. And he did show good takedown defense. I mean, his fight before the Oliveri fight was against Junior Aleksei, who's had some UFC experience, and Aleksei was working for that takedown, working against the cage, looking to clinch and get him down, and he defended it well. But ultimately, as you've covered and as you said, I think Makhachev, personally for me, he's one of the top guys in the division. He's going to be a top 5 fighter, if not higher. And I just think he will be able to get Tsarukyan down. I don't see many people being able to defend the takedowns from Makhachev. And I also think at some point he will wear on Tsarukyan if he can't get back to his feet quickly. And I mean, if he gets taken down early in round 1 and he spends a lot of time on his back, they come out for round 2 and the same thing happens, I think that's where Makhachev can really start to advance position, wear him down with that ground and pound, and ultimately he will work his way into a dominant position to look for a submission. And I see the fight going exactly the same way as you. I've got Islam Makhachev to win this fight. I'm going to win via submission in round number 2.
And we move on to our second parlay piece, and we're actually going to be revisiting a fight that we've already broken down, and there's a good reason for that. So we're going to be revisiting Gadzhimurad, Antigulov, and Michał Oleksiejczuk. Now, we've obviously both disagreed on the result, John. I've got Antigulov to win via submission. You've got Oleksiejczuk to win via knockout. Now, I actually think it's going to be one of those two. I think we're either going to see a submission and a finish from Antigulov, or a knockout and a finish from Oleksiejczuk. Now, the reason why we're revisiting this, and it's the second parlay piece, is because although we disagree in regards to the method of victory, the outcome, and who wins, we do agree definitely that this fight ends, which brings us to our second bet. So for me, we don't have the over or under the totals lines yet. I do believe that it's going to be set at 1.5 anyway, so I would be a bit sketchy of playing the under 1.5, because there is a chance that it does go 7.5 minutes, even though I do believe it will be in the first round or really second round. But the parlay piece for this is the fight doesn't go the distance, and I absolutely see. I don't see much possibility of this fight going the distance. I mean, you look at Antigulov, the dude's fought 25 times professionally, and he's only been to a decision once. Michał Oleksiejczuk has fought 15 times professionally. He's only been to 3 decisions, so a couple more decisions there for Oleksiejczuk, but still out of 15 fights. The fact that he's improving, the fact that he is aggressive, the fact that if he can keep the fight standing, that Antigulov is likely to gas on the feet, ultimately leads me to believe that Oleksiejczuk would knock him out in that scenario. So the line's currently sitting at -365, which again is a high line, but this is why we've created the parlay piece, because you look at Makhachev, who I think is probably going to settle at around -400, and then you've got the -365 line. Without me doing the absolute maths, you'll be looking at somewhere between -150 and maybe -190 when you add those two together. So ultimately, I believe that Islam Makhachev and fight doesn't go the distance in the Antigulov and Oleksiejczuk fight. I think it's a good parlay piece. John, what's your thoughts, man?
Yeah, I'm in agreement with you. Obviously, like you mentioned, we disagreed on how the fight is going to go and who's going to win the fight. But as you said, we both agree on the fact that we think this fight is not going to go the distance. And yeah, I mean, I stick by my pick in the Oleksiejczuk winning this fight via knockout, but because of the fact of I think Antigulov will gas. But equally, I can see where you're coming from. If Oleksiejczuk does get taken down and his ground game isn't what we think it could be, and that's the level it needs to be at against a guy like Antigulov to be able to escape the submission attempts. And if it's not up to scratch, then yeah, you're right. There's every chance he'll get finished either via submission or ground and pound. And then as I mentioned in the breakdown, if he does get back to his feet, then we could see Antigulov tire. And again, that's where my pick comes back in, and Oleksiejczuk can do damage on the feet. So yeah, for me, I can't see a way that this fight is going to go the distance. The only way I possibly see is if they're both very cautious, they're both aware of the other strengths, and Oleksiejczuk tries to just keep a real distance and not really engage and just try and work the jab from the outside. It'd
have to be a timid fight, man, for that to happen.
But I just don't see that with either of these guys. I mean, Antigulov will press forward and look for takedowns, and Oleksiejczuk has been aggressive in his fight so far and just marched forward and thrown a lot of volume and thrown strikes. So I don't see that happening. So yeah, I think either way, this fight is not going to go the distance and go to the judges' scorecards.
And now it's time for the dogfight. So we believe the best underdog on the card is in the Marcin Tybura versus Shamil Abdurakhimov fight. And for those that already know the line, you know obviously which way we're going with this one. And it's Shamil Abdurakhimov for me, and plus, you know, he opened up at sort of like plus 170 or something along those sort of lines, and he's now sitting at plus 135. I still think there's value on the line. I'm unsure why he's such a big underdog in this fight to Marcin Tybura. Now, initially I thought when I went into tape that Tybura would just have this huge advantage in the speed department, which I think is would have been absolutely key to victory for Tybura, because Abdurakhimov isn't the quickest fighter on the feet. He's got decent boxing, he's got decent wrestling, he's got decent top control, but his speed does lack a little bit. And I thought Tybura was a very quick moving fighter with quick combinations and volume. But actually revisiting the tape, I think Tybura has shown moments of that in his previous fights, but he wasn't as quick and wasn't as effective with his striking as I initially thought that he was. Hence why everybody that's betting on MMA should run the tape, because sometimes things do come out at you and, you know, catch you by surprise. And this is one of those cases, because like I say, Tybura generally tries to use his wrestling, get in on the hips, get the takedowns to accommodate his striking, because I do feel that he falls behind in some fights with his striking. And in regards to his gas tank as well, I don't think that's the greatest gas tank. You know, I know the heavyweights and they carry a lot of weight, and a lot of them do tend to gas later on in fights. But we've seen Tybura in some horrible positions before, like the Arlovsky fight, for example. He nearly threw that fight away for himself. He tried to finish Arlovsky on the mat in round 1. Admittedly, he threw way too many shots, more shots than he should have thrown. He should have picked his opportunities a little bit better. But ultimately, he was the one in control of the fight. He was the one that was trying to get Arlovski out of there. He's the one that would have had that adrenaline rush at that time. And ultimately, he's the one that really tired in that fight. I know Arlovski tired as well. Arlovski came back and won that second round. And if it wasn't for that takedown from Tybura in that third round, then again, I don't know whether he'd have won that fight. And that was a fight I actually bet Tybura in as well. The fact that he scored that takedown, because Arlovski was tired as well. Arlovski just had no get-up game at that point. And ultimately, that led to Tybura winning. Now, when Tybura is mixing in his striking, the one thing that he has to be careful about in this fight is his kicks, because again, man, looking back at the tape, there's not many better kick catchers than Shamil Abdurakhimov. He was taking down Derek Lewis time and time again from Lewis kicking him. He took down Arlovski 2 or 3 times in their fight from kicks. Taking that tool, taking that weapon, that one weapon away from a predominant striker in Tybura could be a real issue for Tybura, because if he's not timing his kicks well, he's going to get a very big heavyweight that's going to lay on top of him. And Abdurakhimov is going to have the size over him, he is going to have the power over him, and he is going to have the strength over him. So the last thing that Tybura needs is Abdurakhimov laid on top of him. Now, I know Tybura showed that he can get up to his feet in the Derek Lewis fight again. Derek Lewis is a big imposing heavyweight, but I don't believe Derek Lewis's top game in regards to the grappling is as skilled. I don't think he's as skilled as Abdurakhimov. And, in the grappling department, that showed as well, because, listen, Abdurakhimov's fought Derek Lewis as well, And like I say, Abdurakhimov was winning that fight for 4 rounds, and until he made one mistake, he was on his back, and Lewis finished him with the trademark ground and pound. So I think that when Tybura's coming in, I think he's going to be the one that's going to be pushed forward a little bit more early on. But Abdurakhimov's boxing is decent, and his counters are decent as well. I'm finding it really hard to see Tybura having a lot of success in this fight over 3 rounds, because I just don't see where he's going to find his entries against Abdurakhimov. He's quite fundamentally sound defensively and offensively as well. The one thing that Abdurakhimov does have to be careful of, though, is getting taken down himself. We saw Arlovski take him down a couple of times, and Tybura does have some decent trips and boot sweeps as well on the feet to put his opponent on his back. And Abdurakhimov, he does look like he's got urgency, so I do like that about him as well. I do think that plays into him being the dog, the best underdog on the card, in my opinion. So I think it's going to be a close fight. I think both fighters are going to have success. I think both fighters are going to land punches. I think both fighters are going to land takedowns as well. I don't see any of them actually finishing the other guy. I think if anybody comes up with a finish, I would suspect it would be more likely to be Abdurakhimov, because he's the bigger, more imposing heavyweight. I think he's going to have more power behind his punches. But I do think the fight goes to a decision. And as I said earlier on in the breakdown with the Pavlovich fight, Abdurakhimov is a Russian in Russia, and I feel that another close fight that goes to the scorecards, I think he'll likely get the nod on the judges' scorecard. So I've got Shamil Abdurakhimov to win. I'm going to take him to win via decision, and again, I think it's going to be another close fight that's going to be scored to him. John, what about you?
Yeah, I think this one's going to be a really close fight, and I also agree with you. I don't think it's a fight that we're going to see a finish in. I think it will go to the judges' scorecards, and I do think it'll be a close fight. I mean, Abdurakhimov in his last fight against Arlovski didn't look great. I mean, that was quite a close fight, and he edged it out over Arlovski. But obviously before that, his striking looked a lot better against Chase Sherman. I know we spoke about Chase Sherman before. He's not really at the top level of competition, but he can be a dangerous guy. And I mean, he put him away with pretty much ease and very early on in round 1, and he's going to be the bigger, stronger guy, more powerful in there. I think he will be able to have some top time over Tybura. Like you said, I think it probably will come from one of those catching one of those kicks. And if he can spend enough time on there, do enough damage while they're on the mat, and Tybura struggles to get back up, like you say, Tybura did gas in his Arlovski fight, and I know that was more through his own offensive attacks rather than being on the defensive. But I mean, if he's got a big heavy guy on top of him, especially if he gets on top of him in a couple of rounds as well, I do think Abdurakhimov can wear on him and can make this fight ugly and sloppy. And I do think it will, like you said, he will go to the judges' scorecards. And in Russia, there's every chance that the Russian guy is going to get the decision. I mean, Tybura's last fight was the win over Stefan Struve. Anyone who's listened before knows how much of a Stefan Struve fan I am.
Too much of a fan, in my opinion.
Too much of a fan, man. He's my favourite ever heavyweight. But man, he's got some lapse defence against the takedown, and Tybura exposed that and worked his game plan perfectly. But I mean, in his previous fights, he got finished against Derek Lewis. He lost to Verdum. Obviously, we spoke about the Arlovski fight that was close, and he just edged in that third round. Win at UFC 209 over Luis Enrique. I don't think he's great either. So, yeah, I do think this fight is going to be really close, and I do think Tybura, especially with his hands, I think he has got quicker hands than Abdurakhimov, and I do think that he may be able to hurt him, not hurt him to close to a finish, hurt him, but land shots, probably a more appropriate term to use in the first round. But yeah, I do think if Abdurakhimov can then put some pressure on, clinch, make it ugly, take him down, have some top time, I think the tide will start to turn. I think Tybura might start to tire a little bit. Abdurakhimov will see where the weakness is and see where he can win this fight, and I think that will be by making it ugly, clinching a lot, taking him down, pressuring against the cage, and then just squeezing out a decision. And as you mentioned right at the very start of this breakdown, I was quite surprised that Abdurakhimov was the underdog to such an extent, and yeah, for me, it's probably got the best chance of the dogs on this card. So I'm also going with Abdurakhimov to win this fight, and I also think he'll win a very close decision.
Yeah, I mean, just quickly touching upon a couple of points there. I'm not surprised that Abdurakhimov is the underdog. I do get why Marcin Tybura is the favourite in this fight. It's just it shouldn't be to this extent.
Yeah.
It should definitely be closer to a pick 'em than it should to Abdurakhimov being sort of like plus 140, plus 150. And in regards to Tybura and his takedowns, he's got to get the takedowns in the middle of the cage. He has to, because if he goes to the cage against Abdurakhimov, stronger, man, he's more imposing. So, like I say, I do see multiple avenues to win for Abdurakhimov. But yeah, ultimately, I think he's going to score on the judges' scorecards. And with the breakdowns complete, we're now going to enter the quick fire round. And first up is even Shtyrkov versus Devin Clark. John, who have you got?
Yeah, this is going to be an interesting fight. I mean, Shtyrkov, his nickname is Hulk. I mean, the guy looks big. He looks strong. He's got wins over UFC vets, Thiago Silva, Maldonado, people like that. And I'm going to pick him in this fight. I mean, I know Devin Clark is the more experienced guy in the UFC. Obviously, we saw he had that fun fight with Alexander Rakic in his last fight, and he's fought some tough guys, Pavlovich as well. But yeah, I like Hulk in this fight, man. I mean, he can finish fights with strikes, submissions. He's won a lot of decisions as well. But yeah, I'm going with Shtyrkov to win this fight by decision.
Yeah, I'm going the other way on this one. I think that Shtyrkov's definitely He's mixed his career between heavyweight and light heavyweight. I think that he's definitely better at light heavyweight, which is a good sign for this fight. But man, I just think that Devin Clark's got a really good stall game when he's fighting smart. I think he's a grinder. I think he can take Shtyrkov deep into his UFC debut, and if he does that, if he weathers an early storm, because I do think we're going to get an early aggressive storm from Shtyrkov, I think if he can weather that, maybe grab a couple of takedowns within that storm, I think he can take him deep. And if he does that, he could tire Shtyrkov. I think Clark's got the better gas tank. I think he's the UFC vet. So I'm going to take Devin Clark to win via decision. Now, in the next fight, we've got Roxanne Modafferi versus Antonina Shevchenko. John, who have you got?
Yeah, this again is a good fight. I mean, Modafferi, he's really one of the pioneers of women's mixed martial arts, man. She's been fighting for years and years. I mean, looking back, her very first professional fight was back in 2003, and yet one thing I love about her is she went on that run in the middle of her career where she lost about 8 of 9 fights or something similar, including the fights in the Ultimate Fighter, that is, and she came back and she had that win streak, and at the moment though she's only won one of the last 3 fights. I mean, Ciara Eubanks was the last fight that she lost, and Nico Montano as well. But yeah, I'm going with Shevchenko in this fight. She's the much better striker for me. I think Modafferi's better on the ground. She poses more of a threat with her submissions and her grappling. But Shevchenko, she's got, although she's only competed a couple of times in the UFC, once in the UFC. The one time was in Dana White's Contender Series. She's got a good striking. Obviously, she's anything like her sister as well. She's going to have good takedowns, good takedown defense. She did utilize some takedowns herself in her last fight against Ji Yeon Kim, and yeah, I just think she'll be able to keep this fight standing long enough to put a beating on Modafferi on the feet, and for that reason, I'm going with Shevchenko to win this fight via decision.
Yeah, I'm agreeing with you as well. I think the fight predominantly takes place on the feet. I think Modafferi could be the one looking to try and take the fight down to the mat when she's realising that the volume's not quite there for her and she's being tagged up a little bit and the fight's starting to slip away. I don't think she's going to have much success on the takedowns, and if she does, I think Shevchenko can stand up relatively quickly after she gets taken down. So like I say, I think the fight is going to be won and lost on the feet, and for that reason I have to go with Shevchenko. She's the better striker, the more decorated striker. I think she's going to put the volume on Modafferi. I think Modafferi is very tough as well, so I don't see a finish there. So I'm going to pick Antonina Shevchenko to win. I'm going to pick her to win via decision. Now, in the next fight, we've got the returning Krzysztof Jotko against the newcomer Alen Amedovski. John, who have you got?
Yeah, this again is a really interesting fight. Me and you spoke actually a couple of days ago about this card and how it's a lot of the matchups are really close because you've got guys who've been in the UFC vets, but are on a bit of a losing streak or coming in off a loss against guys who are undefeated or got a very good record but fighting outside of the UFC. So it's really tough to kind of get a judge on what kind of level these guys are at. But I like the looks of Amedovski from what I've seen of him. I mean, he beat Will Fleury, who we know quite well over here in the UK, beat him in the first round via strikes at Bellator 203. Finished that up with a 12-second win at Bellator 211 over Ibrahim Mane. And he does possess a lot of power in his hands. I mean, every fight he's been won via finish. He's 8-0. He's won every fight via knockout or TKO. Jotko, of course, in his last 2 fights has lost via strikes. One thing I do like about Jotko, he's got a nice jab, nice crisp jab, and he works behind that well. He's tall, he's got the height and reach advantage in this fight. But I'm going with Amedovski again in this fight. I'm going with the newcomer purely due to the fact that this guy does possess power. We've seen him before, especially on those Bellator cards against guys with decent records. Also, not the records to the level of Jotko, but decent records, and he's fared well. He's knocked them out quickly in the first round. Jotko has been finished in his last 2 fights, and I don't know whether he's just on the slight decline. It wouldn't surprise me at all if Jotko did come out and play this played this very, very safely and just worked behind that jab for 3 rounds and avoided any dangerous exchanges and got a decision win. But for the sake of this podcast, I'm going to go with Amedovski, and I'm going to go with him to get another finish. I'm going with a round 1 finish by knockout.
Yeah, I'm going the other way here. I think there's obvious red flags on Jotko, as you've already touched upon, back-to-back knockout losses. Amedovski's packs power in his shots. But listen, Amedovski hasn't fought the best competition. It's his UFC debut. He hasn't been deep into fights, so I do, again, question what happens if Jotko takes him into deep waters. I think Krzysztof Jotko has taken the correct time off. He's taken like 12 months off, which I think on his current run of form was a smart thing to do. He's still been training at ATT. He's still quite young, he's still going to be improving. I just feel that the time off was the right amount of time off to regroup, to get things back together. I think he's absolutely technically sound. I think unless Amedovski does find a home for that one big shot early on as well, I think Krzysztof Jotko will take over the fight late, and I'm going to take Jotko to win via decision. And in the next fight, 2 newcomers. We've got Movsar Evloev versus Seungwoo Choi. John, who have you got?
This card's definitely testing us on our pronunciations, isn't it? And I'm not the best at pronouncing people's names anyway. But yeah, we've got Seungwoo Choi against Movsar Evloev. Guys that I don't really know a great deal about. I've watched a little bit of footage on them both. Evloev coming in from M1. We know M1 have got some good guys, some dangerous guys. And Evloev, I'm going to pick him to win this fight purely due to the fact that from what I've seen, he can be dangerous everywhere. His last fight against Rafael Diaz, he won in round 5 via strikes. He's won in round 3 prior to that, rear naked choke. He's won a decision in the fight prior to that. And he's got a variation of wins across his career, and he looks very well rounded from what I've seen. Seungwoo Choi, I've seen very little of the guy. He's been fighting over for promotion TFC. His level of competition looks decent as well. I mean, he's not fighting against scrubs, like 6-2 his last opponent, 8-1 the opponent before that, a couple of 5-2s in there, 3-1. So he's not fighting bums or anything like that. But purely due to the fact that I've seen a bit of Evloev, he's coming in from M1, who we know are a strong promotion with good fighters. He's very well rounded. He can go 5 rounds and still be dangerous in those latter rounds, and I'm going with Evloev to win this fight. I think he'll get a stoppage. I think it'll be a 3rd round submission, so I'm going with Movsar Evloev to win this fight.
Yeah, I think this is a sneaky good fight, man. Evloev is the bantamweight M1 champion, and we've got Seungwoo Choi, who was a champion in TFC as well, and so we've got a champion versus champion from different promotions now. Primarily, I do he's a striker versus grappler. Seungwoo Choi being the striker, Evloev being the grappler, but Evloev's striking, in my opinion, is better than Seungwoo Choi's grappling. So that gives Evloev more of an advantage, as I believe he's more well-rounded. But what's interesting is this fight's at featherweight, and Evloev has predominantly fought at bantamweight. Now, Seungwoo Choi looks quite big at featherweight anyway. So I think there's going to be a big size advantage in this fight for Seungwoo Choi, but ultimately I think that could potentially work in favour of Evloev, as when he's level changing, the hips are going to be closer to him. I do think that it's going to be a little bit cagey early on. I think both guys, again on the debut, might be just a little bit cautious of doing anything daft and overcommitting, but ultimately I just think the experience and the quality of grappling that I've seen from Evloev is going to be enough to close the distance. Seungwoo Choi has had his back pushed against the fence in previous fights, so the distance can be closed on him. I think Evloev's going to thrive if that's the case here, which I think it will be. I think he's going to find the takedowns that he needs, and I do see him getting a late finish as well. So I'm going Movsar Evloev to win via ground and pound TKO. Now in the next fight, we've got Sultan Aliyev versus Keita Nakamura. John, who have you got?
Yeah, again, this is another fight that I think will be pretty close. We tend to see Nakamura go to a decision, whether he wins or loses. He's a veteran of the sport, man. He's fought coming up to 50 times now professionally in his career. He's most dangerous with his grappling. He's a very good grappler. He's dangerous on the mat. Like I say, he's hard to finish. I mean, over the last 3 years, he's 3 losses in that time. Have been against my guy Tom Breeze, Zaleski dos Santos, and Anthony Rocco Martin as well. So they're really tough guys, high level guys, and none of them have put him away. I mean, we've seen what Anthony Rocco Martin can do. We've seen how Zaleski dos Santos can finish people, and Tom Breeze finishes people. I mean, I think that's the only fight of Tom Breeze's career that he hasn't won via stoppage. So he's tough and he's durable. Sultan Aliyev has really he's failed to impress me so far in his UFC career. Obviously, he lost to Kenny Robertson in his UFC debut in the first round via strikes. Then he beat Bojan Velikovic by a close split decision. Then he lost to Wally Alves, but that was obviously due to that nasty eye injury in the second round at UFC 224. And I'm going with Nakamura to win this fight. I think it's going to be close, like I say, but yeah, I think they're going to be pretty close on the ground. I think Nakamura will be able to get some takedowns. I think Aliyev will get a couple of takedowns, but ultimately I think that Nakamura is just going to edge this, and I'm going with Nakamura to win this fight via a very close decision.
Yeah, I'm going the opposite way again on this one. I'm going with Sultan Aliyev to win. I think that I agree it's going to be a close fight. I think both lack volume nowadays. You know, Sultan Aliyev's never been a high volume fighter anyway, but I do believe Nakamura is starting to hit a little bit of a decline, and we have been seeing, you know, I know he's lost against good guys, but we have been seeing declining performances from fight to fight, and the volume's taking a hit as well. I think it'd be quite a technical fight in regards to both the styles. So Nakamura will just be looking to pick his shots, be accurate opposed to volume from the outside. We'll see Sultan Aliyev try to close the distance and get through that shot picking to close the distance on Nakamura to get the fight to the mat. His wrestling, combat sambo is his preferred style. But again, I tend to agree with you, John. I think that it's going to be a really close fight. I think both are going to have the moments on the feet. I think both are going to have the moments on the mat, but ultimately it's going to come to a close decision, which again, the theme that I've been talking about in this podcast is that I just think that the hometown guy is going to get the fight score to him. So I'm going to take Sultan Aliyev to win. I'm going to take him to win via decision. Now in the next fight, we've got Alexander Yakovlev returning versus the newcomer Alex da Silva. John, who have you got?
Yeah, again, I'm going against the Russian guys, and I'm going with Alex da Silva to win this fight. The reason being, this guy's 23, he's an up-and-comer. Obviously, we talk very often about how they're going to making his UFC debut, and we talk often about how they're going to fare under the bright lights of the UFC. But I like the look of this guy. I mean, again, I haven't seen a great deal of him, but from what I've seen, he's dangerous. He hits hard. He's won a lot of fights via knockout. 13 of his wins, of his 20 wins, have come by knockout. He's got 7 submission wins on his record as well. He's fought against some tough guys. He's fought on Brave before, and which is we know is a good promotion. And yeah, he's got the tools to win the fight in many different ways. Whether it be a knockout or a submission. And Yakovlev, we've got to remember, he's coming into this fight off the back of a layoff of 2.5 years. He last competed back in November of 2016 against Zach Cummins, losing via submission. He fought Kamaru Usman before that, lost the decision. He's got decision losses to Nico Musoki and Damian Maia in the UFC as well. I mean, his 2 wins in the UFC have come against Gray Maynard and George Sullivan, who, although it was a few years ago, I mean, even 2015, Gray Maynard was not the Gray Maynard of old, and George Sullivan, although he has potential to be dangerous, he's not a high-end guy. He's 34 years old, as I say. He's had nearly 3 years out. He's coming in facing a young, dangerous, quick guy who's got the potential to win the fight in a variety of different ways. And I think Aleksei Silva's going to win this fight. I think he's going to win via submission, which is going to be set up via his strikes. I think he's going to possibly knock Yakovlev down and jump on the mat and try to lock in a submission and get the win. So I'm going with Aleksei Silva to win via submission in round 2.
Yeah, I'm going the opposite way once again, man. I'm going to take Alexander Yakovlev to win. You know, we've not seen him since November 2016. It's been a fairly long layoff, but listen, his 2 losses before that, Zach Cummins, who is a good fighter, and Kamaru Usman, who is the now champion. You know, they're not horrible losses. Now, for me, Alex de Silva has got this great record, but his record almost strikes me as the type of record that we described against Joel Alvarez, the young Spaniard that fought not so long ago, who had a terrible performance on his debut.
He wasn't even that good.
Yeah, exactly. And I just think it's that padded style record. Like, if you go and look at Alex de Silva's record, there's only 3 guys at the time that he fought that had a good record at the time that he fought him. But if you go back and look at their records now, there's only one of those 3 that's still got a good record. So I just think it's a bit of a padded record. I think Yakovlev, who was an average size welterweight coming down to lightweight for this fight, I think he's going to be a really big lightweight. I think if De Silva does get close, he does start getting wild, I think Yakovlev can tie up with him and can get him down. So I see a size advantage for Yakovlev. I see an experience advantage for Yakovlev, and I see a skill advantage for Yakovlev. So for those reasons, I'm going to pick Yakovlev to win, and I'm going to take him to win via decision. And in the final fight of the breakdown, we've got Magomed Mustafayev versus the newcomer Rafael Fiziev. John, who have you got?
I'm going with Mustafayev to win this fight. I mean, he's obviously coming into the fight off a loss. That's against Kevin Lee, who's a dangerous top end guy, good wrestler, and good striker as well. Decent all round fighter, but very good wrestler. And he got the better of Mustafayev in that fight, winning via rear naked choke in the second round. But prior to that, I was pretty impressed with Mustafayev. He was dangerous against Joe Proctor, causing some damage with the kicks, and then eventually getting the first round finish. Beat Piotr Hallman as well back in 2015. Obviously, he's coming into this fight as well off a long layout of he fought in November of 2016, but. Yeah, from what I've seen of Fiziev, which again isn't a great deal because these guys are coming in from different promotions. He's undefeated, 6-0, but his last fight he won Titan FC. We know Titan FC are a good promotion, but if anyone's watched that fight against Nursan Tutkaev, I mean, was absolutely dead on his feet in that second round. He literally was bending over with his hands on his knees, gasping for breath every time that they separated, and he had a couple of yards between them. Now Fiziev does come in from he trains at Tiger Muay Thai and MMA in Phuket, Thailand. He has got a good Muay Thai style, and he can be dangerous on the feet. He has got good kicks, good body kicks, good head kicks, but I just think Mustafayev is the better fighter in this all round. He's got the UFC experience. As I said, Fiziev, I've only seen bits of him, and in that last fight against Tutkaev, Tutkaev looked like he just rolled out of bed and turned up to the fight. Man, his cardio was very suspect. So for that reason, I'm going with Mustafayev to win this fight. I think it'll be quite a close fight and hard fought. So I'm going with Mustafayev to win a decision.
Yeah, I'm going to agree for the final fight with you. I think Mustafayev's going to win as well. I just think that he's the more battle tested fighter. You know, I know he's been off for a while, coming off that Kevin Lee loss. But listen, a loss to Kevin Lee isn't anything to be too upset about. The dude's a good fighter. Like you've already mentioned, Tiger Muay Thai for Fiziev, so he's got a good striking base, and the way to beat Modafferi is to pressure him and to really make him shell up and move backwards. But I think against Kevin Lee, Modafferi didn't really have a plan B because of Kevin Lee's wrestling. Whereas I think against a striker and Fiziev, his plan B would be to level change and take him down, which I think is a possibility. Yeah. So I think Modafferi can have some success on the feet with his strikes. And if it does get a little bit too tough in there in regards to his opponent being aggressive and coming forward and really putting the pressure on him, he can just relieve that pressure with a level change. Even if he doesn't successfully complete the takedown, you know, it's just gonna give something else for Fiziev to think about in there. And on his UFC debut as well, I think it's going to be a tough ask for him to win, and for that reason I'm going to take Magomed Modafferi to win. I'm going to take him to win via decision. And that's it for this week's podcast, guys. So John, before we hit the Newsome MMA mentions, what do you need to mention, man?
Yeah, as always, keep a lookout for my work. I always put it on my social media, but some stuff on Newsome MMA, especially if you've got YouTube, man. Just always hit up YouTube and check out and subscribe to the Newsome MMA section on there, because we've got some great stuff, some great interviews. Just recently interviewed a great guy fighting out of Team Renegade in Birmingham. Another good guy to look out for in the future, Mo Zubair, and there's some really good guys we've got coming up soon for interviews and things like that. So check out work on the Newsome MMA website or on YouTube. And yeah, as always, just hit me up on Twitter at MMA and me. I love discussing all things MMA with you guys out there, and love hearing people's takes and what they've got to say about all things going on in our bubble that is the mixed martial arts world. So yeah, hit me up at MMA and me, and I'll always make sure that I'll give you a follow back, and we can talk all things MMA.
Absolutely. Now for the Newsome MMA mentions. First of all, I want to mention the Newsome MMA website. Don't forget to visit the website at newsomemma.co.uk, where you'll find my MMA betting section, which will provide written betting advice of 3 of the fights that were in the quickfire round that we've just spoken about. You'll also find the locally famous tape index feature, prediction videos from other good MMA content creators on Twitter and YouTube, fighter interviews and content collaboration with Heavy Duty Fight Management too. And you can even request colour commentary and media coverage from Newsome MMA as well. The next mention is the long-term sponsor of Newsome MMA, CBD Life UK. CBD is an amazing product and something that I use myself. Thousands of professional athletes also use CBD too, and at CBD Life UK, they have a wide variety of products to suit the needs of any customer. You can go to cbdlifeuk.com and use promo code Newsome MMA to get 15% off your order. And the final mention is the newest sponsor of Newsome MMA, Golden Ticket Fight Promotions. Golden Ticket put on some fantastic MMA shows and are one of the biggest regional promotions in the Midlands over here in the UK. The next event is GTFP 12 at the Hangar Events venue in Wolverhampton on May the 18th. Tickets are on sale right now, and you can also follow them on all of their social channels, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and keep up to date with everything at Golden Ticket. And that's it from us, guys. Enjoy the fights on Saturday afternoon, 3 o'clock UK time. We'll see you next week.